Welcome to Global Beehive Talk, today with Daniel Akenine, who is the National Technology Officer at Microsoft. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you.
It's a pleasure of having you here on Global Beehive Talk, and I would like you to introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. So I work as something called the National Technology Officer for Microsoft in Sweden. So I work with policy issues and technical strategy for Microsoft. But I also do a lot of other things. I have a main focus on artificial intelligence the last 3 or 4 years, where I'm also the co-founder of a kind of think tank that's thinking about the impact, more or less, of AI in society.
Thank you so much. It's interesting that you're bringing up AI. There's so much happening in the digitalization area domain, and especially during the last 20 years. How would you describe it? How do you think the views on digitalization has changed during this time?
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at it for 20 or even 30 years back, I think the first wave of digitalization, that was really on trying to become smarter as a company from a process perspective. So you try to do the same things that you have always done, but you try to do it more efficiently. And I think that was extremely successful for many, many years, because you had so much manual labor that could be automated inside your company. So I think that was a target for many, many years. And then we had in the early 2000, we had the first wave of digitalization. So 20 years ago, there was this incredible internet boom, which basically meant that we had digitalization everywhere. People were talking about digitalization, but a lot of those promises that were made during that time was not really something that was in the end fulfilled. So I think we saw a disappointment of digitalization in the beginning of the 2000, 2005, etc. And then people went back, more focus on technology, more focus on getting things more mature and doing things that really worked. But then we saw a rebound, actually 5, 6 years ago, on the topic of digitalization. So I think we saw the same kind of discussions that we had 20 years ago. They came back 5 or 6 years ago, but in a much more mature environment. You didn't have to make promises that couldn't be kept anymore. You could actually realize a lot of those digitalizations that you were just talking about 20 years ago. And I think we are still there, and that's more about digitalization changing the business, because today the consumers are digital. They weren't necessarily digital 20 years ago. Today they are, so it's possible to create these digital services. And now we have AI, and AI for many is basically a new term for digitalization, I would say. It actually isn't, but for many, they basically replace the word digitalization with artificial intelligence instead, I think.
So it's a very, very interesting journey. You're talking about that the consumer getting more and more digitalized. How do you see their sort of expectations has changed, or what are the expectations now?
I think the expectations are, if you can digitalize or actually digitize a service, you have to do that because people want to consume it in a digital form. So if it is possible, not everything is possible. Food is difficult to digitalize, for instance. But if you can digitize what you're selling, the consumers will almost definitely prefer the digitized version, because they already have a digital consumption pattern. So I think people expect digital services today.
Interesting. What we are experiencing now the last year is the COVID-19 pandemic. How do you think that has influenced the digitalization of work with remote work, new digital tools, or ways of communicating or collaboration?
Yeah, well, I think that has changed it dramatically, to be honest. There was a very, very fast digitalization in the beginning of the COVID crisis. And people had, of course, been talking about, working from home or doing things remotely, etc. And they had plans, but those plans were, 6, 12, 18 months ahead. And then suddenly you had to realize those plans just in 1 week. So I think we saw a dramatic increase in doing remote everything, really, not just working from home. It was also shopping from home. You see e-commerce booming. You saw a dramatic increase in healthcare uh, that you could do remotely, etc. So I think healthcare online was, dramatically increased. And I think everything that has to do with resilience for the businesses as well. If you can do something that could make your business be more resilient for these types of crises, then people, organizations are interested in that. And before the COVID crisis, I don't think people had that as a primary driver for what they were doing. They were more focused on the business outcomes and could we save money by digitalization, etc. But now people are saying that, but they are also saying, how can we reduce risk in our company by digitalization, for instance? So I think that's it has really created a very, very fast digital transformation during a very, very short time period.
Yeah, I see that many companies and municipalities witness that they have achieved more in digitalization in the last 6 months than they've done the last 6 years. And there's been more investments and shorter decision times for actually implementing digital solutions. Is this something you see as well? And how do we keep up this momentum?
Yeah, I think we will keep up the momentum in many areas, but not in all areas. I think if you look at working from home, for instance, I think you will see a stronger combination, but people will get back to working at offices as well. I'm pretty sure on that. You will not see a fully, just work from home culture. I don't think so. There are many benefits of meeting each other. The environment is more focused, basically, on working. And of course, just physically meeting people is also what creates connections, etc. So I think a lot of those digitalizations that we're forced to do, will partly continue, but a lot will go back as well, like events, for instance. But some things is not going to change. I think that shopping online is something that people didn't do because they weren't used to it. But then they see, well, it works, and I want to continue doing that. So I think in some parts there will be a permanent change in society and automation.
That's true. What do you see the biggest challenges for the society and businesses today when it comes to digitalization? I read a report, an OECD report, that Sweden is ranked quite low in that. What do you see are the biggest challenges going forward? What has been the biggest challenges so far?
Well, it depends on the different sectors. But if you come to, for instance, the public sector, which is something that's in great need of digitalization, because there is a dramatic increase in, for instance, the constant need of healthcare, which is typical. People are getting older. If you just see in the statistics, it's very quickly to realize that you will need more work to be done in those areas. And you can't add people because there is not so many people that can work, which is educated, and it would be so dramatically costly to do that you have to do it differently. So the only solution there is to digitalize, to take down the costs, for instance, for healthcare, future healthcare, and a society where fewer people are working. You have to be more productive, because otherwise the systems will collapse. So I think the public sector is somewhere that you really need to focus on. And Sweden has been quite good on digitalization in the public sector, but it's a system. Sweden has a system where it works quite fine for different municipalities or different agencies, etc., to digitalize very quickly because we are quite rich as a country. We are quite well educated. People can implement a solution or innovation, but we are quite bad on taking that innovation and scaling it to the global or to the national side. So because then you need coordinating, you need somebody that takes a lead, etc., and drive that. And I think on that, the Swedish system is actually not as good as some other countries. So it's both on a positive and a negative side when it comes to digitalization of how do you implement, digitalization that actually works for everybody and on the national level.
But you're saying here that it's actually about governance and coordination that is one of the key challenges. Is there some sort of confusion about who should take the lead? Is this a responsibility of if you go in the public sector, the municipalities themselves or agencies themselves, or is this a national initiative? Is there some sort of confusion there?
To some extent there are. But it's not it's not a simple solution to solve, because if you're saying that you are responsible suddenly, so if you became the CIO of Sweden, everybody, you would see less local innovation, because people would say, well, it's you that's responsible, so it's the CIO, we don't have to take care of digitalization anymore, it's somebody else's problem. That's also an effect if you centralize and you centralize the mandate. So, but in Sweden, it's very low down in the organizations, and it might be interesting to have a more. So in Sweden now we have, of course, the DIG, which is the agency responsible, but maybe that agency should take a stronger lead in some areas. That's possible.
Yeah, definitely, because I witnessed as well about digital strategies around the country that are a little bit confused about what is the direction of how do we achieve scalability of this digitalization efforts and making good use of best practices, for example, in different parts. What do you think is, if you would give some recommendations to these municipalities or companies generally who are struggling with digitalization, what would you say to them?
Well, I think when it comes to new technology, especially when it comes to the next generation of digitalization, which is really about artificial intelligence, what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of organizations that is searching for solutions, and they're finding solutions, but they are not really sure what problems they have. So they are taking or buying a solution, and then they are trying to implement that solution into an organization that doesn't necessarily have that problem. So basically, you see a lot of digitalization, solutions looking for problems. And I think there is a tip here, and that tip is to really try to, you should understand technology, but it's also extremely important to understand the exact problem that you're trying to solve. And is this problem suitable for a digital solution, or is it another solution to this problem that's the best fit? So don't try to to press on a digital solutions that's going to solve everything. Try to start with the problem, understand technology, work with people that understands AI, etc., to see if that is a good fit. Then you go from that point forward.
Yeah, there's talk a lot about AI, artificial intelligence, in this matter, and making it equal to digitalization. Do you think that these companies and municipalities or agencies should prioritize digitalization? I mean, there's a lot of talk about technical depth and other areas, problem with integration and coordination across different sectors or units within the organizations themselves. Do you think that what should be prioritized when it comes to these companies or organizations?
Well, I think if you look at in some areas, you are seeing an incredible potential for instance, AI. So AI has a kind of a new potential for digitalization because it's targeting areas that we couldn't digitalize before.
Mm,
So it could be topics like reading text or answering questions. It could be understanding pictures, etc. All of these topics was something that could only be solved by humans, even though we had been digitalizing for many years. So now suddenly you have capabilities that's actually addressing those as well. So I think if you should look at the very low hanging fruits with a lot of potential. It could be in the medical sector, it could be triaging, which means that trying to understand the diagnosis of a patient, etc. That's very time consuming as well, which is possible to digitize. If you can digitize those types of scenarios, they have dramatic increase, dramatic possibilities to save money,
mm,
which would basically free up a lot of time
mm,
for other areas, which then could be solved,
mm,
etc. So try to focus on these big, low-hanging fruits
mm,
first, and be a little bit bold in trying to solving those issues, I think.
mm. We've been talking quite a lot about the past, what has happened up to date. But if you would give some future vision or scenario, where are we in 5 years' time or 10 years' time?
Yeah, it's always difficult to say. So 10 years time is almost impossible. But that's if we do speculate a little bit. So I think we will continue to see dramatic increase in how technology is going to continue change our life. So sometimes I hear, well, we had the internet boom 20 years ago, and that was dramatic. We had the mobile phones, etc., revolution, which also was a dramatic change.
Mm,
But people now say, well, have we seen any dramatic technology shifts the last 2, 3, 4 years? And maybe there haven't been the same dramatic changes, but you're still seeing a lot of technology in different areas that's changing the
mm,
world. So you will have just if you when you have actually self-driving cars, for instance, that's going to revolutionize the transport system. And if you're revolutionizing the transport system, that's going to change a lot of other things that's surrounding transport. So you could get deliveries home to you in any time and any place that you want, etc. So I think that we're going to see dramatic increases in how we live, because there will be a couple of dramatic changes. And I think also from a 10-year perspective, I think it will probably take 10 years, but maybe in 10 years, you will also have, maybe you don't have a mobile phone anymore. So you will have glasses instead that will work as your interface
mm,
to the internet and different services.
mm.
And that will also create a dramatic difference in how we live. So I think people are not really actually realizing how big of a change that technology actually will make on society for the next 10 years.
Mm. Yeah, I think we are in many cases are in the starting phase of digitalization. I mean, it's going to happen. So many things are going to happen in the next 50, 100 years in this area that we probably cannot imagine today, based on the technology or the digital solutions that we are now building the foundation for. Thank you so much, Daniel, for participating in this global Beehive Talk. And I'm very happy to hear your views, both about what has happened during the last 20 years, but also the role of government and the future as well. So thank you so much for participating.
Nice talking to you, Hans. See you.
See you. Thank you so much.